Veve now has well over 2 million downloads, and with more companies looking to get into NFTs, there's still one massive obstacle that gets in the way of all of it. That is learning how to get mass adoption for this space. In this video, I'm going to share with you why I believe Veve could potentially be the #1 NFT platform in the next decade. So let's get started. Welcome in everyone, my name is Andy and I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come and watch this video on the channel. Just before we get started, if you do enjoy the content, you can hit that subscribe button or you can even support me by joining the membership. It would mean the world. Back in early April was when I'd found out about Veve. My friend had told me about it, to get into it, to see what it was like and to just understand it a little bit more. And after a little bit of back and forth, I decided to get on and join. And from then, I've been hooked and I've been absolutely loving to collect on the platform. Something that I've been able to build a community with on here, as well as meet some incredible people on this platform who are so smart and understand a lot more than I do. Ease of use in order to get into Veve, to then get hooked, and then to be still continuing today, 9 and 10 months later, is something surreal. During the time I dipped my toes into Veve, I'd got some of the drops. I started to learn about Batman and Ultraman and Powerpuff Girls and more to understand what I wanted to collect and why. Then found myself gravitating towards more NFT platforms. And the one many of you will know is OpenSea. OpenSea became a lot more complicated a lot quicker. There were rug pull communities, there were people who were looking to just solely take advantage of you, there were YouTubers who were shilling projects because they were getting paid by these communities in order to say that they were great projects and they were going to be something fantastic. There was then learning about gas, there was then learning about royalty fees, following all these different projects, how to get whitelisted, and so much more. It was overwhelming to say the least. There was a time where I definitely got really burnt out when it came to OpenSea and buying NFTs on there and trying to keep up with everything because there is just so much to pay attention to. Of course, the main one that came out was that you could make a lot of money quickly. That was why people wanted to get in. A lot of people do get hurt when it comes to that sort of stuff. Because one of the most important factors to think about when it comes to this is that the average consumer may not be inherently rich, can get into something that can make you a lot of money quickly. A lot of people can get burnt on that because they chase FOMO and then bad things happen and they lead to having absolutely nothing. Whereas when it comes to something like art pieces that have been established for hundreds of years, most likely the average consumer isn't even thinking about those because, well, they can't actually afford them. This is why it led to me moving back to Veve and not really paying too much attention anymore to OpenSea. I still have things on OpenSea like the Galaxy Eggs and Crypto Dads, as I truly believe in the projects that they have. I've not been joining in whitelists and really trying to dive in the same way as I used to when it came to OpenSea. It feels right now there's still this massive barrier that stops people from getting into NFTs because one, they just may not believe in them at all. Two, just the complications when it comes to paying $200-300 at sometimes for gas before you've even paid anything. And sometimes that transaction can fail and you don't even get what you'd paid for. This again isn't things by branded companies, licensed companies, or just individual artists who may not even have the same security as some other things. This is again why Veve stood out to me, because it was so easy to get involved and you could trust them in a sense that it was branded and licensed by the biggest companies in the world. Things like DC, now Disney, Marvel, Cartoon Network, and you've got hundreds of other brands. Even car companies like Citroen are now involved in Veve. So you know for a fact that those companies aren't going to tarnish their career or their brand just by getting into something that's random and hitting and hoping. They're going to do their research, they're going to get their lawyers involved and make sure that they're protected, as well as the consumers who are buying their product are protected in what they're actually buying. Although it might not seem like it in that sort of instance, they do have to make sure that the consumer is happy with what they're getting. So Veve have been working with like the Disney artists, the Cartoon Network artists and more to make these things what they're actually meant to be made for. This is again why I bring it back to how I believe Veve will become one of the top players purely due to its ease of use. If mass adoption is going to happen, people need to first find it easy to actually get involved in something. People need to see that this actually has some value. And one of the things that gives something value is the history that it has. So if you see something by Disney, you already know that the product that you're going to get for it is going to be of somewhat of a higher quality than some other things. Whereas when you buy a project on OpenSea from an artist you've never heard of or a company you've never heard of that have just started, you don't really have that same credibility when it comes to it. So having those partnerships with all the biggest brands in the world does make it somewhat more credible and easier for an average consumer to think, I'm going to give this a try, I'm going to go for something that's maybe backed rather than not. Other argument that people have when it comes to NFTs and digital art as a whole is that It has no value whatsoever other than a picture on your screen. When in reality, everything that we have that's not a need is just something that the consumer prices at what they price it at. You're not told to buy NFTs, just as much as you're not told to buy a Gucci top for like $250 when you could get the same thing for probably 10 that just doesn't have a brand on it. Consumers are who price and buy these products at. You're never actually forced to buy anything, just as much as you're not forced to buy anything in the real world, you're not forced to buy anything in the NFT space. So yes, you may think they shouldn't have value, but therefore every other company in the world that does something at a premium, it could be done for way cheaper and just at base price of what they're costing, then shouldn't exist. I understand there's other arguments when it comes to it, but at a base level, everything shouldn't be over what the price of it costs to actually make is at. Therefore, NFTs are worthless and so are Gucci tops. Everything that you have should be a need and not a want. And therefore, that's why I see the world continuously moving in this direction. It seems like the next step in what we're moving towards when it comes to things like the metaverse and actually spending time in there with other people and seeing them around the world. It's just like that progression we had when it came to things like social media, text messages, FaceTime, Discord calls, and more. We're talking with people all over the world in the blink of an eye, and now being able to have virtual land and virtual homes where we're going to be able to hang out with each other, which is the step in VR, now going to get more advanced over the next decade. I see the ease of use of getting into something like that originally, or what most people are going to look at, is what the big brands are doing. Things like Facebook have changed their name to Meta and they've hired hundreds of people in order to move that forward. Although I believe Facebook have a lot of issues when it comes to it, there's going to be a lot of people who try out Facebook the first time when it comes to their metaverse, as it's the ease of use of getting into something like that. Just the same as when you're wanting to collect for the first time in the digital space, something like Disney you're going to trust more than something that has really not been established over decades upon decades. If someone like my dad can go on, sign up for Veve, and then start collecting without actually that much help, then you know it's going to be easy for the average consumer to do the same. Because trust me, my dad isn't that great on phones, so him even being able to do that and actually look at the market and understand it blows my mind. Whereas if I was to take him onto OpenSea, told him to open a MetaMask wallet, connect everything to it, find a project that he likes and buys it, it's unlikely that he's going to find something that is either easy to get into or have the money to get into, because if it says it's $200 and he puts $200 in and then tries to buy it, he doesn't have enough because gas stops him from doing so. He then has to understand a little bit more about what gas is, why it increases in price, what times to buy at, what the rarities are, and more, as they're a little bit more complicated when it comes to something like that compared to Veve. When you truly try to break them both down, you know for a fact that Veve is just simpler to understand. If you're bringing someone into this space for the first time, you have to make it as easy as possible for them. More and more people are now signing up for OpenSea, just as much as more and more people are now signing up for Veve. I've seen a heavier increase when it comes to something like Veve than I have with OpenSea, because it just seems like the easy transition into it. It has to be a way where we build that bridge and we make it a happy medium for people to actually get involved in this space if we're looking for mass adoption and if the world is actually moving in this way. When it came to things like the internet or social media, there had to be an ease of use to break their way into it, because mass adoption wouldn't have happened otherwise. The internet had been in the paper saying that it was going to absolute nothing, no one was going to use it, but then it became easier to use and therefore people done it. Just the same as we went from fax to email, it was easier to use email and they made it easier to be emailing people, so therefore people adopted email instead of fax. And now it's the same as the digital world and what we're moving into. People are not going to adopt the digital space if it's not easy to get into. They need to find a way to make it simple, and Veve does that. Whereas, although OpenSea can be simple in some instances, I found that I had to do a lot more research when it came to buying anything on that platform compared to Veve. I spent 10 times the amount of time researching something on OpenSea that can potentially be a rug pull, whereas I can use trusted brands on Veve to actually get involved. I know if I'm putting my first $100 into something, I'm choosing Veve 9 times out of 10. The other thing with Veve is that they've been able to develop a community around all these brands to then build their own community within themselves. So because we're pulling in people from Back to the Future, we're pulling in people from Disney, we're pulling in people from Coca-Cola, we're pulling in people from Cartoon Network, they're all becoming a part of the Veve community. They may have liked Back to the Future originally, but now they're collecting Batman series. Just as the same for me, I didn't come in for Ultraman, I came in for Batman. That's why I wanted to be here. I loved Batman, and now I've collected the ones that I love. But now I'm collecting things from individual artists like Frank Kozik and Jermaine Rogers. I'm finding things like Ultraman really interesting and learning more about them, and even wanting to see the TV series when it comes out. I'm also wanting to learn more about what Disney and Coca-Cola are doing for their future when it comes to this digital space, and have found a community involved all through this one platform. When you start on something, you often get deeper into the whole of what it is, and therefore you find the communities that are involved, and Veve is just like that. They're wanting to see each other grow, and they've been growing exponentially over the last few months. The future is obviously unpredictable. We don't know yet if NFTs are going to go to zero and that nothing is ever going to be adopted from it. But it seems to me that the people I've talked to who are in the internet era and the social media era is the exact same here. Millions of people who are terrified of this product and what it's meant to be. There's people in here for the money, there's people in here for the community, and there's people trying to develop this new Web3 metaverse that will transform the world as we know right now. The world moves a lot faster than it used to, so these changes are obviously going to scare a lot of people. But from what I've found so far, this community is something that doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. And more are giving it a shot just because they're wanting to see what this is about and maybe don't want to miss the boat. Often the best things that happen in life are usually the ones that have those barriers to entry originally, and before you know it, when they really are taking off, people wish they had got in. I'm guessing this was the exact same instance was when Netflix came about compared to something like Blockbuster. Things like Blockbuster, one of the biggest companies in the world, completely went out of business because things were just made simpler. It's the way of life, and we often find things that are just made simpler for us to do. So when we are actually comparing NFTs, and if we actually do believe they're going to be our future, then whatever makes it simpler for the average consumer to get in is what people will adopt. Disney now have over 118 million on their Disney Plus subscription. I'm guessing Netflix have more than that. And there's a ton of other TV services that have all went to streaming platforms because they know they can target more of the consumers in the market that were watching them on the television previously, or even renting their movies previously from Blockbuster. Personally, I believe Veve are going to be one of the #1 NFT companies in the world. They have trusted brands, they have trusted licenses, or are going to work towards and making the average consumer have the ability to easily get involved in what Veve is as a whole and understand it without having to actually do that much research. It's going to be one of those things where you're actually helping the company when you don't even know that you're helping the company. Things like when you're buying the NFTs on the platform, you're helping the cryptocurrency as a whole. But 90% of people don't need to know that. It's just what will actually happen in the background. Amazon started out with just books. Disney started out with just the animation and has now come to what it is today. Everything has to take a progression, but we have to look at what is going to become 1% when everything else fails. Because most companies do fail, most things in life do fail, but there's those small percentage of things that succeed, and we have to figure out why and follow the trends as to why they were. Amazon made it easier for everyone to get into purchasing things online, getting the next day delivery. Netflix made it easier for people to get streaming services online and watch all they wanted in the one place. Veve have been able to bring in all the biggest brands in the world into the one place, created a system which makes it exciting to get in drops, built in a community, and are now moving forward into 2022 with an all-time high of users, downloads, revenue, and more. If they continue to move forward the way that they do, I can see Veve becoming one of those 1%. And if you have the ability to get in now and just dip your toes in the water, I'd recommend giving it a go, or even giving it a little bit of research. At the end of the day, you've nothing to lose other than time if you don't put anything into it. And I'm not trying to force your way into Veve and what it is, because I know there's flaws with it too. But we have to look at what is going to make the average consumer actually give this a shot. And I feel the biggest brands in the world is what will convince most people to at least give it a try and see what it's all about. What's your thoughts on NFTs as a whole? Do you think they're going to go to zero? Do you think Veve will be a 1% company, or do you think it will fail like maybe the rest will? Let me know down in the comments. I know the video on the screen right now will be something you'll love to watch. Have a fantastic day.